Uhuru. Yeah, I want to thank Uhuru Solidarity Committee for inviting me here to speak today. I think it was really important, that historical overview that Jesse gave, because I think what we have is just what he said, a history of colonial violence. Not just violence, but what we define as colonial violence against African people. And it's not just violence by a crazed white man in Charleston, South Carolina. This has been going on for some 600 years since Africans were snatched from our homeland and brought to the United States. So Africans are not experiencing the Charleston contradiction maybe the way that a lot of white people may be experiencing, because this has been our life from Emmett Till during the Civil Rights Movement, to the murder of Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, and if you want to bring it home right here in the city of St. Petersburg, Tyrone Lewis killed, Trayvon Martin, all examples of colonial violence. Jesse mentioned the McKinney, Texas situation with the pool party, where the cop viciously attacked these teenagers in Texas. One of the things that I thought was striking about the video, if you watch the video of the McKinney, Texas situation, I think it goes back to what helps to kind of emphasize something Jesse mentioned about white people acting as extensions of the state. Did you notice in that video, as the police were pushing this young African's head down, there was a white man saying, "Get back." He's protecting the police from the people, from the young Africans who are trying to help this African get away from this terrorist. So that, I thought, was a perfect example of this kind of colonial violence, and the example of some white people acting as extensions of the state, because I think it's important to point that out. As Jesse talked about, it's not just the police who kill African people. However, I think it is important to note that the police do have a big role in murdering African people. They are part of the state. And when we say state, we mean that instrument of coercion, those institutions of coercion that force African people to do things against our will. The creation of a white state in this country, of course, was founded on the blood of the native people in the United States and the enslavement of African people. That's how this colonial country, this colonial state was built, on our blood. So black people, African people, are not seeing a new experience when Walter Scott is shot 8 times in North Charleston in the back. This is not a new experience. This is an old experience for African people. The situation in Charleston, I think, is worth noting because here are these Africans in a church praying. A white guy comes in, he asks for the pastor, he sits next to the pastor. And these Africans are not reacting like he was some outsider. He's accepted into the church, and then he kills 9 people. I think the aftermath of that brutal colonial attack and violence was very interesting, how it is now unfolding in terms of that narrative that's being built around what happened in Charleston, South Carolina. It has reached a point where now the discussion is about whether the Confederate flag or the U.S. flag should fly over the state capitol in Charleston, South Carolina. And from my point of view, I can't tell the difference between the two. We can't tell the difference because we have been victims of colonial white state for these 600 years. So when we see an American flag, although that's not to say that some Africans are not confused on this question, because I saw many pictures on the internet, people calling for take down the flag, take down the flag. And if you raise the US flag, what you're raising is the symbolism of just what Jesse was talking about, theft of the land from the native people, the theft of half of Mexico, millions of Africans dying, being brought here against our will. So when you raise the American flag, it's not like you doing something good, raising some beacon of freedom for African people. That's not the case. As a matter of fact, there was no Confederate flag when they enslaved African people. There was no Confederate flag. It was just a U.S. flag with the stripes and all that. Of course, it evolved over time. But if we want to talk colonial violence, I think the rebel flag is child's play compared to what we know about what America has done and continues to do. And while they might be talking about the bygone idyllic era of slavery and the South and how nice it was and that kind of thing, we still see drone strikes on oppressed people all over the world, in Somalia, on the continent of Africa, in the Middle East, on behalf of that same U.S. flag. So we don't see the same thing that the oppressor nation sees, that the oppressor nation state sees. We have seen 600 years of terror from that flag. We don't think that we have enough police to protect every black church in this country. There's a lot of them. And we believe that we have to approach this struggle that African people are in, this struggle for African liberation that Jesse talked about as the title, White People in Solidarity with African Liberation. This struggle for liberation is not one to end racism, the ideas in the heads of white people, or the ideas that are part of what we call superstructure of capitalism and imperialism that gives direction and creates the institutions and puts the ideas in the heads of quote-unquote regular white citizens. We are not fighting against those ideas. What we are fighting is a system that has taken the self-determination and power away from African people over our own lives. That's what we're fighting. So we don't want you to be confused when they say Dylann Roof is the problem. Dylann Roof is the symbol of the problem. He is part of that superstructure. He's taken those ideas that come from that superstructure of U.S. imperialism and then acted on them. There are hundreds of Dylann Roofs. There are hundreds of them. But they will never be more dangerous than the white nationalist state itself that continues to carry out terror against African people. One of the things that I think is important to note, just to give you an example of what I'm talking about in terms of the state carrying out terror against African people. The FBI keeps statistics on the killings of African people from 2007 to 2012. The FBI's reports, one of the FBI reports says that a white police officer killed 2 Africans on average a week from 2007 to 2012. Now, the numbers that they came up with were based on less than 5% of the U.S. police forces in this country. There are 17,000 local police agencies in the United States. Only 700 and something of them reported to the FBI these numbers about how many Africans they killed. So it could have been thousands more than they reported. But that's just an example of the violence of the state. So even though you would see a Dylan Roof who acts as an extension of that state, the kind of damage that the state itself carries out on behalf of the white nation to maintain that white nation will never be duplicated by a guy like Dylan Roof. So we want to talk briefly about that narrative that we see dominating the media. One striking thing to me is this question of Dylan Roof. Somebody was telling me the other day they saw a story that said Dylan Roof was a terrorist. And the way the media is projecting the ones who are taking on this terrorist line, they don't mean terrorists against Africans, they mean it's terror against the United States, which in my view helps to misdirect the whole question of colonial terror and the terror of the colonial state against African people. That's part of the narrative, this ridiculous narrative with the flags and all that is several different versions of the narrative coming from the imperialists. Then the media almost act as the information arm of the state. They act as the information arm of the state. If you notice, every time they murder an African, essentially what they are reporting is what the police told them. That's what they report. So we see essentially a state report coming from the white media telling us what happened to an African. How the police, and even as they report these ridiculous stories about how cops can kill somebody in Ohio, shoot at them 137 times, and then get acquitted because the judge says, well, you can't prove that this particular guy was the one who fired the shot of those 137 shots that they shot at these Africans and murdered them. So the media is more than just complicit. It works as that information arm of the state. But I don't want us to feel like we are defenseless, because we are not. The African People's Socialist Party and the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement, along with the Black is Back Coalition, has, as part of the coalition, we have taken on the campaign for what we call Black community control of the police. And why is it important for African people to control the people with guns in our community? Well, we know all the horror stories about Eric Garner, who was choked to death on camera. We know about Mike Brown, who was shot down in Ferguson, Missouri, about Tyrone Lewis, who was murdered right here in the streets of St. Petersburg. Black community control of the police is a concept that we are pushing, a campaign that we are pushing, that says that African people must have power to hire, fire, discipline the police in our community. But it goes further than that, because what we have is a colonial relationship where the police act as an occupying army in the African community, and the African community is the occupied. So what we have to do in this campaign is deconstruct that colonial relationship of occupier to the occupied. When the occupied has power to control the people with guns in our community, that's when you will see change coming about in terms of all these murders of African people. It's not about their feelings, it's about power. It's not about body cameras for the police, because if they give the police body cameras, what you're going to see is more executions of black people on video and more exonerations of the police in these courts. That's what we're going to see. without a doubt. It's not about citizens police review committees. We say it is about power. How can it be about a citizens police review committee, particularly in a place like Florida, where a citizens police review committee has no power at all? The only thing it can do is review the actions of the police once the investigation is over. They can't even look at a file of an active investigation. So we're saying this is about power. This is a struggle for power. Not a struggle to make white people like us, not a struggle against racism, but a struggle for us to get power, Africans to get power over our own lives. That's what we believe is the essence of the contradiction that Black African people face in this country. On top of that, this is an international contradiction, because I talked about the U.S. flag and how that flag, in the name of that flag, how Africans in Somalia are being killed, Arabs in the Middle East are being killed by drone strikes ordered by a neo-colonial president right here in this country. Of course, Kwame Nkrumah said neo-colonialism was the last stage of imperialism, meaning that the use of people who look like us to attack us, like Barack Obama, the president, the U.S. neo-colonial president, is now being used, somebody that looks just like an African, just like us, used to kill our people all over the world. And to, of course, insult the Africans right here in this country. And then when he feels pressured enough then to pay lip service to what he says is the problem with situations like the one in Charleston. He doesn't describe it as an attack or colonial attack. He said it's about gun control. There's too many guns. It can't, well, if it's too many guns, then disarm the police. It seems to us that it would make sense if you disarm the police. If you say the problem is too many guns and black people are being killed by the police, then disarm the police. If that's the problem. But we know it's not the problem. We know it's not the problem because we can see, even as the police murder us, we see the extension of the U.S. state through people like Bill and Ruth. And you will see a consistency because the police can carry out these kind of executions of African people all over this country with impunity. The people, the white people acting as part of the U.S. state carry out the same thing. That's exactly what they're doing. But we don't see lynch mobs in the same form as they used when Jesse was talking about, with picnics and children dressed up in their nice dresses to watch lynchings. Now they come in blue uniforms as the lynch mob. But these are just as horrible deaths that Africans suffer, like Mike Brown, like Walter Scott shot in the back 8 times. These deaths are just as terrible as these lynchings that were carried out by the extension of the U.S. colonial state. And I would reiterate that the struggle is for power. We want power. Because once we get power, everybody don't like us. Once we get power, everybody will like us. That's how it works. When you get power, everybody likes you. They used to say to Chinese, if you're Chinese, you don't have a Chinaman's chance. They don't say that anymore because they got power. So when we get power, they won't be able to carry out these exemplary kind of executions that they've done on our people ever since we've been here. So I just want to reiterate, the demand for black community control of the police is one that we believe, while it is not a revolutionary demand, it is a demand that is tied to a revolutionary strategy. It is different from the demand for body cameras, different from the demand for police review boards, and that's a demand that we want everybody to unite with. We have petitions to mandate black community control over the police. I have some with me. I hope everyone will sign the petition before we leave here, because that's what real solidarity means. I know a lot of people get tied up in saving whales and saving the bears and saving all kinds of other animals, but if we don't destroy imperialism, this animal, this human African animal will be destroyed. So we believe that it's incumbent on everybody who believes in justice to become part of USM, the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, and get on board with real solidarity, because that's what real solidarity means. The same thing that Jesse talked about, supporting the demand for reparations for African people. That's what real solidarity means. And I hope that you will exercise that real solidarity by signing a petition for black community control of the police. We have it here, so don't run out the door. Once it's over, don't run out the door. And we're going to hang around and do some question and answer. So I want to thank again Uhuru Solidarity Movement for inviting me here to speak. I'm Chimurenga. I'm with the African People's Socialist Party. I want to thank Jesse and all the leaders of USM. Also, I want to recognize our chairman, Chairman Omali Ishitella, who is in the room here today, who built this movement, built the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, built the African People's Socialist Party, built the entire Uhuru movement. He's also the founder of the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement, of which I am the president. So I want to say Uhuru, let's move forward with real solidarity. Uhuru.